There is a moment in every life when the noise becomes too loud, when advice, opinions, and our own anxious words fill the silence that once held meaning. We keep speaking to be understood when what we truly crave is to feel seen. But what if the answers we're chasing aren't hiding in the noise we make, but in the silence we fear? Because when you stop talking, life begins to whisper truths you've been too busy to hear. We live in a culture where speaking has become a form of survival. We talk to prove that we matter, to fill the silence that feels too heavy, to avoid confronting the echo of our own truth. We use words like a shield, carefully crafted sentences that protect us from being misunderstood, from being vulnerable, from being seen too deeply. But the irony is, in our desperate attempt to be understood, we often drift further away from understanding ourselves. Silence, on the other hand, doesn't flatter us. It doesn't rush to rescue us from discomfort. It holds a mirror instead. It asks us to look closer, to see beyond what our words try to conceal. When you stop talking, you begin to notice the subtle tremors within you, the ones that your business and constant chatter have been silencing. You notice the thoughts that have been waiting for your attention, the emotions that you've been postponing, because they feel inconvenient. Silence becomes a space where your truth finally gets a voice, not through sound, but through sensation. The unease, the restlessness, the tears you've held back, they all surface in the quiet. It's not a punishment. It's a revelation. Silence isn't empty. It's full of the things you've been too distracted to feel. There is a kind of courage required to sit in that quiet, to stop explaining yourself, to stop needing to be right, to stop trying to win every moment with your words. Because when you stop talking, you lose the illusion of control. And that's where transformation begins. You begin to see the layers beneath your defenses, the fear that hides behind your confidence, the exhaustion beneath your optimism, the longing behind your anger. Silence doesn't expose you to the world, it exposes you to yourself. In our conversations, especially with those we love, we often speak from the place of protection rather than connection. We rush to fill pauses, afraid that quiet means distance, when in truth, it's in those pauses that understanding grows. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to stop talking, to let silence breathe between words, to allow another person's truth to find its way to you, unfiltered. It's in that mutual stillness that intimacy begins. Not because we finally found the perfect thing to say, but because we had the wisdom to stop saying anything at all. When we embrace silence, we discover that our words were never the real carriers of meaning. They were only the surface. Beneath them lies the pulse of everything we've wanted to express. Our fears, our hopes, our tenderness. And that pulse can only be felt when the noise stops. So maybe the point isn't to speak louder, but to listen deeper, to the quiet spaces between your words, to the language of your own heart, and to the gentle whispers of a life that's been waiting to be heard. Stillness is something we've learned to resist. We associate it with laziness, with doing nothing, with falling behind. We've been taught that motion means progress, that to pause is to lose momentum. But what if stillness isn't the absence of movement at all? What if it's the beginning of awareness? The moment where life stops rushing past you and begins to move through you. The world tells us to keep going, to keep producing, to keep proving. But stillness whispers something different that you already are, even before you do. When you allow yourself to stop, truly stop, something extraordinary happens. The noise in your mind starts to settle like dust in a sunbeam. What once felt chaotic begins to take shape. You begin to notice what has always been there, but rarely gets your attention. The rhythm of your breath, the heaviness in your body, the quiet thoughts that rise and fall like waves. It's not about becoming passive. It's about becoming present. Stillness doesn't mean you've given up on life. It means you've finally arrived in it. In stillness, your senses sharpen. You see more clearly, you listen more deeply. The small moments that used to slip by unnoticed. Light spilling through a window, the sound of laughter. The way your heart softens when someone looks at you kindly. Suddenly feel alive again. The beauty of stillness is that it allows you to be in direct relationship with the world, unmediated by the constant commentary of your mind. You no longer need to name or define everything. You can just be with it. And in that space, clarity begins to form. Not the kind that comes from planning or overthinking, but the kind that rises naturally from within when the noise fades enough for truth to speak. There is a deep intelligence in stillness, a wisdom that the world's chaos often drowns out. When you stop forcing solutions, answers often reveal themselves. When you stop filling every gap with activity, creativity begins to breathe again. Stillness gives birth to movement that is intentional rather than reactive, grounded rather than frantic. It's where intuition lives, not in the rush of decision-making, but in the pause before it. We are so used to chasing certainty that we forget how much clarity can emerge from quiet uncertainty. Stillness is not about escaping life. It's about entering it more fully. When you sit in silence long enough, you start to feel the weight of your own existence, not as a burden, but as a privilege. To be here, to be aware, to be connected to something larger than yourself. You begin to trust the unfolding, to realize that you don't always have to push for things to happen. Sometimes, all that's needed is to step back, breathe, and let life catch up to you. Because when you allow yourself to be still, life no longer feels like something you have to chase. It starts to meet you exactly where you are. To truly listen is one of the most profound expressions of love. Yet most of us don't really listen. We wait to reply. We listen to defend, to correct, to prove that we're right or that we've been wronged. Conversation becomes a competition of perspectives rather than an invitation to understanding. But when you quiet that inner urge to respond, something shifts. The space between words begins to expand, and in that space, empathy grows. Listening is not about hearing the sound of another's voice. It's about opening yourself to their world. It's about letting their truth exist without interruption. When you stop talking, you start to notice what's really being said beneath the words. You hear the sighs, the pauses, the hesitation between sentences. You begin to sense the emotions that language tries to cover. The fear behind anger, the sadness behind indifference, the longing hidden inside frustration. To listen is to go beyond what is spoken. It's to enter the emotional landscape of another person without needing to fix or interpret it. That kind of listening asks for silence, not the silence of distance, but the silence of presence. Listening in silence is an act of surrender. You let go of your need to control the conversation, to guide its outcome, to shape how you are perceived. You stop trying to manage the moment and simply allow it to unfold. It's vulnerable because you're no longer armed with words. You're naked in your attention. But it's in that vulnerability that connection begins to breathe. You start to feel the other person, not through their logic, but through their humanity. And something miraculous happens. They begin to feel seen. Because to be truly listened to is to be acknowledged in your existence. The same applies when you listen to yourself. We spend so much time drowning in external noise that we forget to hear the sound of our own truth. We silence our intuition with constant reasoning, our emotions with distraction, our needs with guilt. But when you sit quietly and listen to your heartbeat, to your unease, to the quiet yearning within, you start to reconnect with the part of you that's been waiting for attention. Listening then becomes a form of self-love, a way of saying, I'm here, I'm ready to hear you. Every relationship, whether with others or with yourself, deepens in the presence of this kind of listening. Because love is not found in the exchange of words, but in the shared silence between them. The silence that says, you don't have to perform for me, I can hear you even when you don't speak. When we listen like that, communication transforms into communion, and what was once noise becomes music, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Life doesn't always speak in grand gestures. It rarely announces its plans with clarity or certainty. Instead, it whispers. It leaves small signs, subtle nudges, quiet invitations that most of us are too busy or too loud to notice. We expect direction to arrive with fireworks, yet the truth is, life often speaks in murmurs. A feeling you can't explain, a coincidence that repeats itself, a moment of stillness that feels strangely significant. These are not accidents. They are messages waiting for your attention. But to hear them, you must learn to live in a different rhythm, one that values presence over performance and awareness over urgency. When we fill every silence with noise, every pause with activity, we drown out the very wisdom that's trying to guide us. We say we want answers, but we keep interrupting the conversation that life is trying to have with us. The whisper of intuition is soft, and it doesn't compete for attention. It waits for you to be quiet enough to receive it. And the moment you do, you begin to sense a quiet intelligence that's always been there. An inner compass that doesn't need validation or explanation, only trust. It's not easy to listen to that whisper because it often leads us in directions that logic cannot justify. It might tell you to slow down when everything around you says hurry. It might tell you to let go when your mind screams to hold on. It doesn't speak in guarantees. It speaks in faith. That's why silence is so powerful. It becomes the bridge between what you know and what you feel. In that space, intuition becomes audible. And intuition, more than anything else, is life speaking through you. When you learn to move with that quiet guidance, you begin to experience a deeper sense of alignment. Decisions no longer come from fear or pressure, but from a grounded knowing that feels peaceful. Even when it's uncertain, you start recognizing patterns in what once felt like chaos. You begin to understand that life is not trying to test you. It's trying to teach you. And the lessons come not in noise, but in nuance. The still voice inside you is never absent. It's simply waiting for the volume of your world to turn down. Listening to life's whispers requires patience. It asks you to slow your reactions, to question your assumptions, to trust your pauses. You start realizing that silence isn't a lack of answers. It's the moment before the truth arrives. Every whisper carries direction. Every pause holds purpose. Every still moment has meaning. The more you practice listening, the more fluent you become in life's language. Because the truth is, life has always been speaking to you. It's just waiting for you to stop interrupting. We often speak because silence feels like surrender. We talk to convince, to explain, to control the narrative, believing that if we can just say the right thing, we can shape the outcome. But the truth is, control is an illusion dressed as certainty. We cling to it because we fear what might happen if we let go. Yet, letting go is not weakness. It's a quiet act of faith. It's trusting that not everything needs to be spoken, and not every situation needs to be managed by force. The more we grasp for control, the tighter we hold on to our anxiety. But when we release that grip, when we surrender the need to orchestrate everything, we create space for clarity, for peace, for truth. Stillness teaches us this truth again and again. When you stop trying to control the conversation, you start hearing what's really being said. When you stop trying to control the timing of your life, you begin to notice that timing has its own wisdom. Every pause, every delay, every unanswered moment holds purpose, even when it doesn't match your expectations. We fill silence because we think it means nothing is happening. But in reality, silence is when the most important things are taking shape. Beneath the surface, beyond our sight. There's a moment in every relationship, in every pursuit, when control becomes exhaustion. When the effort to manage every detail drains the very life from what you're trying to protect. That's when silence arrives like an unexpected guest. It asks you to sit down, to stop forcing, to simply be. In that surrender, clarity begins to rise. Not because you've figured things out, but because you've stopped getting in your own way. Control narrows your perspective. Surrender expands it. The more you try to hold, the less you can receive. When you let go, you make room for life to participate with you. You open yourself to possibilities that your plans could never have imagined. You realize that peace is not something you can command into being. It's something you uncover when you stop interfering. Surrender doesn't mean inaction. It means aligned action. It's the difference between moving from fear and moving from wisdom. And you can only access that wisdom when you stop speaking long enough to hear it. Letting go of control is an invitation to trust the process. To understand that silence is not a void but a vessel. That uncertainty isn't punishment but potential. We don't need to have everything figured out to be at peace. Sometimes we just need to step back, breathe, and allow the space for life to move as it's meant to. Because when you stop trying to control everything, clarity doesn't disappear. It finally has the room to find you. Transformation rarely happens in motion. It doesn't arrive in the rush of change, in the flurry of decisions, or in the urgency to fix what feels broken. It happens quietly, often without an audience, in the still moments where you are left alone with yourself. We think growth is loud, that it comes with visible signs, new achievements, new beginnings, new directions. But real transformation begins beneath the surface, in silence, where no one is watching. It's not about doing more. It's about finally listening deeply enough to hear what life has been trying to tell you all along. When everything around you slows down, when the noise fades and the distractions lose their power, you meet the most honest version of yourself. And that encounter can be uncomfortable, because stillness doesn't flatter you. It reveals you. It shows you where you've been hiding, what you've been avoiding, and who you've become in the process of trying to be everything to everyone. It's in that discomfort that the old self begins to shed, quietly, naturally, without needing your permission. You start to realize that the transformation you were chasing was never about becoming someone new, but about returning to someone true. Stillness gives you the space to recalibrate, to question what you've been carrying and whether it still belongs to you. To notice how often your words, your choices, even your dreams have been shaped by noise. The expectations of others, the pressure to perform, the fear of standing still. Silence interrupts that pattern. It reminds you that healing doesn't happen when you add more. It happens when you begin to release. And when you finally allow yourself that release, something remarkable happens. The weight you've been carrying begins to turn into wisdom. There's a sacred simplicity in this process. You don't need to announce your evolution. You don't need to prove that you've changed. You just begin to move differently. You respond with more patience. You speak with more intention. You listen with more compassion. Stillness teaches you the language of presence, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but naturally commands it. The kind that doesn't need validation because it comes from within. And as you settle into that quiet confidence, you begin to see that transformation is not a destination, it's a rhythm. It's the ongoing dance between letting go and allowing in. In a world that glorifies noise, it takes courage to be still. To choose the quiet path, the slower pace, the deeper breath. But that courage is where everything changes. Because when you can sit in silence without needing to escape it, you discover that transformation was never something waiting for you out there. It was always unfolding inside you, one quiet moment at a time. Because only in stillness do you finally hear the voice that says, "You have arrived."